All right, we're on page 125 of the notes, and we've been through the beast out of the sea. Beast out of the sea is emperor worship, or emperors. You know, this is what society brings up. Society likes to have a king. Israel said, give us a king. We want to be like everybody else. That's just the nature of man. So here we see the beast out of the earth. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs in which it's given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had a wound of the sword and has come to life. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand and on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of its name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. Okay? The famous 666, right? All right. So, then he says, I looked and I saw another beast. He said he saw this beast out of the sea. Now he sees one coming up out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb. So out of the earth means it's not from heaven. 2 horns like a lamb means it looks like sacrifice. Okay. Again, the symbol of the lamb is the symbol of sacrifice. Are these 2 horns representation? Just a representation of a lamb having 2 horns to say that's why it's a lamb because it has 2 horns, or because it has 2 powers? What are the possible symbology of those 2 powers? The 2 halves of government, the 2 councils of the Senate of Rome, perhaps? Or is it political power and religious power? Each one of those horns, again, is the symbol for power. Okay. The state did require the sacrifice to the political power of the emperor. The political power did require the maintenance of pagan worship to preserve the economic security and corporation of the conquered, the conscripted, and the annexed peoples and societies. So does one support the other? I don't know. That's something it's kind of really hard to make from just this small use of the 2.
And then there's the obvious that most animals just have 2 horns.
Right, exactly. All right, so it spoke like a dragon. Even though this beast looks like religion, okay, looks like sacrifice, but it had the deception of the words of the dragon. So Revelation 12:16, but the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. Those lies that dragon had spewed out. Revelation 16:13, then I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Again, these are lies. These are falsities. Matthew 7:15, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. So this is similar symbology. It looks like sheep in sheep's clothing or a lamb, but it's ferocious. It's the dragon who actually speaks. 2 Corinthians 11:14 and 15, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then of his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. So it looks like religion, okay? The second beast is false religion, and it's propped up by the state, and this false religion also props up the state. So verses 12 and 14. He exercises all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword, yet lived. So this kind of fits with the historic picture. The religious organization was part and parcel to the function and the foundation and the way that the Roman government worked. Which started first? The government started first, or this pagan ideology? If you go back and understand how the Greeks thought of their religious ceremonies, and that was kind of built separate from the governing of the Greek society. But here is the first time we see a society, a government system who's built parts and parcel, each side, the religion, all this paganism, wholly supported the government. Okay? And the government therefore gave life to and an authority to these religious powers. Now in verse 13 he says, and he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down to heaven and earth in full view of men. Now, with Jesus, the miracles were essentially done to prove what he said. So it's almost like Satan, or this religious power, had caused these miracles to occur in order to verify that these were heavenly things. Okay? Now, how many of you ever studied some of the religious cults of the time and the various things they did? There were all sorts of drugs that people took. They've even found these jars that had acid in them, and they acted as batteries, and they could create a light with these copper filaments. They could even create a light that came from battery in some of their religious ceremonies. Is that what he's talking about? Is this whatever? There's some people who think that there was some ventriloquism here in 15, 16, and 17. So he was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refused to the image to be worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Okay? Now, we did see a number of edicts that went out under various emperors that had the image, that the image of the emperor should be worshipped, and you were required to do so. When you did so, you were even, most of the time, you were given a card that you possessed that you could then hand in at the various vendors in order to purchase items. Remember that video that I showed you, the giving away of bread? And that bread, each one of them was marked with symbols of their god, that under their trade union had a certain god, and so their bread was marked with this. And people of the seafaring sailors could not buy bread that was meant for various people in town folks. So they had bread made for different folks. Okay, is that probably what we're talking about here? And it seems true, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. It seems strange to me that a theologic or religious society who says we can worship all these pagan deities. And in fact, when we go invade somebody else, we'll incorporate their deities into our deities. Okay? But then all of a sudden Christians arise and it's like, no, you can't have that deity. Why?
There's one God.
Okay? Because it was exclusive. It wasn't just saying, oh, we have our own God. It was saying there is only one God and all yours are false. And that was the big problem. And so, in order to try to eliminate that, what do? You starve the people. You forbid them from owning property. At one point, there were various edicts that Christians could not own property. Christians could not own businesses. Okay? And in order to make sure that you were accepted by the government who controlled all that, you had to go and you had to burn incense and worship and bow down to an image of some god or of the emperor. Okay? That seems like a really harsh thing to require, but they tried everything in a couple of hundred years to squash Christianity. All right, so this mark on their forehead seems to contrast with the ones that we saw on those of the 144,000 in Revelation 7:3. Now, was it a physical mark? Probably not. Was there a physical mark on somebody's right hand, as some have conjectured, that you got like a tattoo on your hand? There's many people now who consider the mark of the beast to be those implanted chips that you can use to go buy groceries just by waving your wrist across the reader, just like we can do our cards now. I find that kind of cool technology. You just go up and swipe like that. The problem with that is you can walk by somebody who's got a reader and they can suck the information off your card. That's why there's wallets out there now that have all this protective wrapping to prevent people from stealing your information. But anyway, so is there people who were marked specifically in some way because they bowed down to the emperor? I think again this is symbolic language. As you mark on the forehead, just like Christians, the 144 true Israel are marked. The false Israel, the fake worship, the fake religion, you're marked on your forehead because this is where you think. Now we think this is where you think. In ancient times they think this is where we think. This is where we feel. Maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Well, even Christians will put ash on their forehead.
Huh?
Christians will even put ash on their forehead.
Yeah. And some of it comes from that as well. Is the right hand significant? Is it the hand you exchange goods with, or is it the power hand, or is it the hand that you use to pledge? Please raise your right hand when you take a pledge, right? That's been going on for a long, long time. So, and he says, okay, now think about this, guys. This calls for wisdom. You gotta think about this. And when God says it calls for wisdom, what is he saying? So I want you to be diligent about thinking about this. And the way God does that, he says, go back to the Old Testament, dig out what it means. Okay? Because everything God gives us is has been told to us in symbology and translated prophecy from the Old Testament. So I find it interesting that, okay, I'm a Roman. I came from a Greek background. I speak Greek. I may speak Latin, but I may speak Greek. It's written in Greek, but to understand this, you've got to have a great deal of knowledge of the ancient scriptures. And, you know, and like I read to you last week, you know, those in Carthage in 313 were under penalty of death to give up all their scriptures. So maybe that you wouldn't understand, you know, how to work in the New World.
You know, I have read that this was probably written in Hebrew because at the time of course it was written in secret, not to be revealed, but yet the Romans spoke
Aramaic?
Yeah, they spoke Latin and Greek.
Greek.
And that's why they think maybe it was written in Hebrew, is because the normal Roman could not understand what it was written.
Yeah,
And it
perhaps,
added-
perhaps.
But, you know, it's just a thought.
Yeah. All the ancient texts we have are all in Greek. Okay. The oldest ones that we can find are all in Greek.
The ones that we can find.
Yeah. Now, was it translated? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Did Paul write it not Paul. John, sorry. Left now, looked at the clock.
It's catching, I've had it for a long time.
I think I'm retiring here pretty soon. I'm losing it. Yeah, so, okay, here, this calls for wisdom. He's saying, okay, think about this right. If anyone has insight, and let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. The Jews and early Christians used perhaps this term called gematria. If you know, some early writers, Irenaeus, one of the first who lived 120 to 202, have calculated that number to three possible names. Euranthus, who we don't know. Latinos, an early king of Latium. Titian or Titan, again of unknown significance, and there's some who say you can get Nero Caesar out of this, or Caesar, but the problem with that is that you have to take this Greek and you have to go back into and do it in Hebrew and then translate it using gematria. The ancient Hebrew language, you know, of which I've got this little thing here, that has all the symbols and the modern symbols. Each one of those is assigned a number in their alphabet, and you can use that to help translate, add those numbers up, and come up with 666. Now, and everybody looks for this Antichrist. This is the number of the man. And everybody has been pointing, and they point to this, and they point to Pope this, and they point to whatever. So, and so, you know, I don't know if we
Steve?
can go that far as to...
Steve?
Yeah?
Back what was mentioned a minute ago, Nero Kaiser is Hebrew, as I understand it.
Yes.
And that's translated to Caesar, Nero Caesar.
Yes.
It's actually Neron Kaiser. And that's why I think they have the thought process that it was Hebrew.
Yeah, could be. Could be. Now, in other places in Revelation, John says when it's key to using the Hebrew, John will point that out. He said in Revelation 9:11, he says, they had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon. Okay, so he's telling you both if it's important. So I think because he doesn't do that with this number, tells us something. Revelation 16:16. Then they gathered the kings together in the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. So again, he says this is a Hebrew word, and that's important to know in understanding it. So I think it's unlikely that John or the Spirit is asking the reader to actually use gematria to calculate the number of the beast. Okay, I think it's symbology. I think what he's saying here is, what is the significance in Hebrew, or what is the significance of 3 6s? Okay, your version. Do you have NSRV? It is the number of a person, definitive. New Revised Standard has that. The number of a man, New King James, NAS, and ASB, is probably better translated. It is the number of man. So it is all human. Okay. Homer Haley, I think, says it best, and even though I've got a typo in here, it's really bad when you quote somebody and make a typo. But that's my wife, which is like red ink all over that.
The Harvard
But-
president had not similar problems.
Yeah. He says, it is the sum of that which is human. So true religion is not from men, Galatians 1:11. I want you to know, brothers, that the gospel I preached is not something that man made up, but I think false religion is. This points to false religion. This is nothing more than men making up a religion that helps support the government. The government supports the religion. Okay? And that influence, this human thing, is now going to oppress the church. So perhaps we can write the summary of chapter 13. Out of society arises a beast in the form of earthly rule, the Roman Empire. Many would feel secure in its power and riches, but it would be allowed to persecute the righteous saints for a short period. It will set up emperors as gods, and with its power will require people to worship him. Another beast would also rise, and it is human religion. The Roman Empire would give it its power, and human religion would in turn feed the desire to worship the leaders of the empire. What deception and power lie in these two beasts? How terrible it must have been to face these beasts and not falter, not to give in, to spare yourself and loved ones the agony of hunger, the pain of exclusion. How terrible it must have been to give up your life or the lives of your children and loved ones for the sake of only food or only income, or for that matter, only religion. Or is it merely religion? Okay? All right, so here you have these two beasts, and you see the power and the conspiracy between the two. I love that word, right? It's used a lot now. It's a conspiracy. Why are Christians conspiracy theorists? Well, that's why. We see it all the time, don't we, guys? But anyway, my brother gets after me. Why you Christians are conspiracy theorists? I don't understand what we read all the time. But anyway, wasn't it a conspiracy that Cyrus was to do? Wasn't it a conspiracy of the Pharaoh, etc. So we now have that. And before we go on, the scriptures now take us to this look of these 144,000. It's the same people we've already seen. And this gives us a different side. He says, okay, this is the earthly view. If it's all about the here and now, yes, then perhaps you ought to bow to this emperor. If it's only 70, then why not? I'm trying to find it, but I saw a video of this nurse who just put out this thing, and she just rails against Christianity. And I think it even came from what's her name, the press secretary, about Christians, and they just bow down and pray before they go help somebody. And she just rails and says, we have people with this. Why don't you go and act on it? Why don't you pray? It's worthless. It's terrible. And you're not saving anybody's life. You're not helping anybody, and you're not going out and doing such. And you're just worthless. It's ridiculous and it's worthless. And you go, okay, fine. If this world is all there is, then yes, we are wrong. If this world is but let's take a look now. Let's take the heavenly perspective here. Let's look at this 144. So perhaps facing this beast is overwhelming. The human mind thinks about here and now and is tempted. How many of you guys have ever been without food for much of the way of time? Either purposely, whatever. So when I was a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts. And I told this friend of mine, I said, I'll bring the tent and most of the gear, and he says, okay, I'll bring the food. Well, we go 10 miles back in the woods on a winter camp out. I mean, it's 10 below zero. And I had 2 sleeping bags inside of each other to sleep in. And he forgot to pack any food for me. So I had to beg food for 4 days on a winter camp out. Luckily, it was at a hot springs, and most of the time, all I could do is just go sit in that 103-degree water. And I stayed in there until like midnight, got 3 hours sleeping bag, and went back in the water because it was warm. Because I had no fuel. It was the first time I've ever fried bananas for dinner. And, man, I was hungry after 4 days. But anyway, how could you run a family, you run a house. What happens if somebody says you can no longer buy fuel, you can no longer buy water, milk, bread, anything to eat? Do you have the ability to get along? Would you not cave under those circumstances? That's what was tried on Christians. All right, so this is the view. If you do not see the eternal picture, the things that happen after death, we're now given a view of the rewards for perseverance, the rewards for sacrifice of life, the reward for following true religion. This section is divided into 3 parts. Chapter 14. And I saw, or then I looked, heads up each of these 3 parts. We see the Lamb and the victorious on Mount Zion. We hear the warning and comforting messages of the angels, and we see the gathering of the righteous and the judgment of the wicked. Clearly, without these views of the other side, we would conclude that religion is folly. Okay? This is the number 1 reason why people dismiss religion, is because they're looking at the here and now. Okay? Jean-Paul Sartre, who was, what do they call those guys? He wasn't a theologian, he was a psychologist? No, that's not the term. French. He made this thing called the famous wager. If you give up your life today, okay, and there is no heaven, then you've lost today. Okay? If, however, there is an eternal, and you give up your life today but win the eternal, you've won. Okay? There's only one way to win. And that was his argument. And it's called Jean-Paul Sartre's wager. All right, so verse 1 in chapter 14. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Again, here is the difference between the two. Those who worship the beast and those who follow the Lamb. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of the harpists playing on their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn the song except for the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as the first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. All right, so who are these 144? I think clearly they are the same 144 that we see in chapter 7, and back then we said those are the spiritual Israel. These are God's own people. They stand on Mount Zion. So Zion was first seen as a stronghold of the city of David, 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles. And because we have so little time left in this quarter, I think I'm not going to read every one of these. But I kind of point to them and show you how we make those conclusions from the Old Testament scriptures. It becomes representations of God's dwelling place among his people. So Psalms 19, saying praises to the Lord, enthroned in Zion, proclaiming among the nations what he has done. So it becomes his dwelling place. Joel, Psalms 48. It is spoken of as a place of refuge, of strength and encouragement, joy and song. May he send you help from the sanctuary and grant you support from Zion. Psalms 20. Psalm 65:1. Praise awaits you, O God, in Zion. To you our vows will be fulfilled. Praise, Psalms 149, 1 and 2. Praise the Lord, sing to the Lord a new song, his praise in the assembly of the saints. Let Israel rejoice in their Maker. Let the people rejoice. The people of Zion be glad in their King. Zion's important in the prophecies of the Messiah. I have installed my King on Zion, my holy hill. And of course in Micah, which is a long one here that I won't take time to read today. Psalms 110:2-6. The Lord will extend your mighty scepter from Zion. You will rule in the midst of your enemies. He will judge the nations, heaping up the dead and crushing the rulers of the whole earth. So it becomes, it's a sanctuary. It's a place of future fulfillment when the Lord comes to rule. He's on Zion. So this hill of Zion is the ultimate reward of heaven.
Steve, I find it striking, even the others, outsiders, the Babylonians would say to their captors would say, sing to us the songs of Zion.
Yeah.
So they recognize Zion.
Yeah, the Zion was a major symbology in the Old Testament for the Jews. So Zion, once a physical place, on the bottom of page 133, grew to represent a dwelling place of God, a place of security, steadfastness, and joy. It is used here in Revelation, becomes the representation of true religion. This religion is established in the heavens. It is fulfilled by Jesus. This true religion is certain, it's secure, it's steadfast and everlasting. Where else would those who are the true worshipers stand? So they stand on Mount Zion, that solid place of eternal religion, of heavenly religion, of permanent religion. And verse 2 says, I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters. So who is this speaking? The roar of rushing waters, instruction, relief for the thirsty. And we've seen that language before. And this voice comes from heaven, so it's clearly God talking here. And a loud peal of thunder. This is a strong declaring judgment. And like the harpist playing their harp, comfort and praise. And again, they're not playing their harps in song, their voices sounded like harps being played. Okay? So when people point to, well, there was in heaven, there's instrumental music, I think this is an allegory. This is not, he's not actually seeing people play harps. He says the sound of their voice was like comfort and praise. And they sang a new song that only those of the 144 had been redeemed from the earth. So this new song is the song of redemption, and the only one who can do that, sing that song, are those who've been redeemed. The song of redemption is meaningless for those who have not been redeemed. All right, verse 4 and 5. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. They followed the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among men and offered first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths, and they are blameless. Find this interesting. In in reading that book I was talking about 1048 or somewhere there in the church history, there became a reformatorio of the church. And there were those who said that all the priests and all the bishops and all the monks, etc., were married or had concubines or saw prostitutes. And he says, we need to clean this up. We need to reform the church. From here on out, all those people need to not marry. Okay? They have to be chaste. They're not allowed to have women. And part of that comes from this. Okay? And that carried on even to this day, right? Don't we have the Orthodox sect of the church in the West that believes that, right? Okay. So they are not defiled. I think this is spiritual. They're not defiled by adultery, but I don't think it's physical adultery. I think it's spiritual. I think it is that they are chaste and they are married to God spiritually. They don't go out and cavort with the world's religions. They follow the Lamb, and they do not follow other religious leaders. They were purchased through sacrifice, and no lie is found in their mouths. So they confess no other God except the true God. So not Caesar, whatever. So in the end, we see the result of true religion. Here with the Lamb are those who are pure. They are pure and present because they commit no spiritual adultery and follow only Jesus. They are pure because they have been purchased by the blood sacrifice of Jesus, and they are pure and here because they confess no other master and God and allegiance. And in verse 6 we have a warning. And I saw another angel flying in the mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the springs of water. And another angel, a second one, follows, saying, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. Okay, so is this gospel a different gospel than that Jesus proclaimed? Is there some time in the future where a new gospel is told to those who stand in heaven? I don't think so. Jude 3, the gospel was delivered to the saints. Matthew 28, the gospel is to preach to all creation. 2 Corinthians 4:7, it is through fragile humans that this gospel is spread. In Galatians 1:8, angels would be condemned if they preached something different. So I think we can conclude that this is the one and only gospel. So the call is made to worship the one true God, not any other false god. So the first warning, fear God because of his power to execute judgment. So fallen in verse 8 is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteress. Now, some people say, well, okay, this is Babylon is a symbol that we use in history of the great adulterer. It becomes the symbol of the Roman society. Now, certainly it still happens today. So is this speaking of some future place or what it is? But when we know that when God prophesies something, it's as good as is done. Isaiah 46:9 and 10. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. And I am God, that there is no one like me. And I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times which is still to come. And I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do what I please. I love that verse because it goes to Bereshit. But anyway, 48:3. I foretold the former things from long ago. My mouth announced them, and I have made them known. And then suddenly I acted, and they came to pass, for I knew how stubborn you were. The sinews of your neck were iron, your forehead was bronze. Therefore I told you these things long ago. Before they happened, I announced them to you so that you could not say, my idols did them, my wooden image and metal god ordained them. You have heard these things. Look at them all. Will you not admit them? So this second warning is saying Rome will fall. And it's just like it already has, because in God's mind, when God says something, it's going to happen. All right, I don't think we have time. Yeah. I don't have time to get all that rest of the chapter done.
We have you ever had conversations with a Jehovah's Witness on the matter of the 144,000 and whether they might be one of them?
Yes.
Have you? That's interesting.
It is, and they said, well, there's only going to be 100 of us.
It's a very
So how long have you guys
motivating
kept
group of
this up, and don't you think that you already made that 144,000? Well, but they not be real. I said, why do you bother? I mean, if it's foreordained, why are you out telling anybody? It just seems like a very small number.
It puts them out on Saturday,
Yeah.
talking, walking everywhere.
They believe what they believe. That's true.
But I do wonder, though, if it is, as you say, the true spiritual, is it
Israel.
possible that there would be 140, a perfection of humanity through Jesus?
Yeah, I don't know. We are made perfect through Christ, even the worst of us.
I mean, it's not saying only those 144 are the
No.
one.
It's a spiritual number. It is 12 times 12 times 1,000. It is the fullness of heaven and earth, the spiritual Israel, those who follow and are made perfect because of Christ, who are in that number. It's a way of expressing the spiritual Israel. All right. Thank you, guys. Pray for snow.
No.